A Wisconsin landlord decided to raise rents on his tenants, anticipating the rent cap that's proposed by President Biden and Vice President Harris. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of the state of Wisconsin. It has to do with this landlord who, hearing about the rent cap that's been proposed by Biden and Harris, decided to go ahead, jump, and raise the rents right now, okay? And here's the thing, right? I agree with this landlord. Right now is the time to raise the rents, if possible, on your tenants before these sort of rent caps are put into place, okay? Now, there's a lot of people that are saying, hey, well, this was just a proposal. This hasn't passed yet. Remember, when the law passes, you can no longer raise your rents, above whatever the cap is. So if they say, oh, well, the cap is at 5% and you're trying to raise your rents 10%, well, you can't do it at that point. So you have to jump the gun. You have to do it early before the law is put into place, or you won't be able to do it at all. Okay? That is logical. That is reasonable. And not only that, right? But as much as some people say, okay, well, a national rent control policy will not pass, but look locally and you'll see a lot of places, even here in the Midwest. I talk a lot about St. Paul, Minnesota, for example, okay? Places in the Midwest even have passed rent control, okay? It is spreading throughout the entire country. It is a bad thing. Do what you can to make sure that your rents are as high as possible, as close to market rates, before this sort of thing hits you. Now, I always tell landlords, keep your rents, as close to market rate as possible. Don't give the tenant any sort of discount. Don't sit there and say, oh, I want to help this tenant out. You do that, you hurt yourself. That's it. And the tenant will not reciprocate and do you any favors. They'll only screw you over if they can. So there's no reason to do that. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So first of all, do you believe that a nationwide rent control or rent cap is going to pass? I don't know. I honestly don't know. A lot of things that I never thought would happen have happened in the last few years. Stuff like, eviction moratoriums, just as an example, okay? Now, I never would have called that. The funny thing to me is that we're sitting here and we're in a position where these are policies that are being proposed by a major presidential candidate. Yet a few years back, if you had said that you wanted to pass a nationwide rent cap, you would have been laughed out of the election. You would have got 0 votes. Well, you know what? How about we do that now? How about we give that person 0 votes? That would perfectly satisfy me. Okay, stop with your communist policies and let's get back to reality. So anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from NBC26.com and it says, blaming Biden, landlord raises rent in anticipation of federal rent increase cap. Yeah, and I'm sure that the way that just the title of the article is going, that they're going to be acting like the landlord is out of their mind or crazy or that is doing something stupid. And you know what? I have to defend the landlord in this situation because, you know what? This is very, very real. This is our money, and we have to make sure that our investment is well taken care of. So anyway, let's get into the article and see what it says. 2 local renters were surprised to find a letter telling them their rent was increasing by at least 12% to $1,400 because the landlord blamed the Biden-Harris administration. The landlord was referring to a July proposal from the White House urging Congress to pass a law capping rent increases on existing tenants to no more than 5%, or the landlord would lose valuable federal tax breaks. The proposal would affect landlords with over 50 units in their portfolio. Congress has yet to establish such a bill. The landlord, Scott Elsner of Bay Real Estate Properties, LLC, declined to comment when reached Thursday. Bay Real Estate Properties owns at least 7 properties, including 6 duplexes around Brown County, according to public records. Video shows the letter to the tenants as well as one tenant's perspective. And so here's the thing, right? They had to emphasize in the article that Congress has yet to pass such a bill. Doesn't matter, okay? Now, here's the truth. This is what I truly believe. Now, I believe that the landlord wouldn't have been able to raise the rents up by 12%, like the article says, unless the rents were already below market rates. That's just the way it works. So my thought is that the landlord, realizing that, hey, my rents are below market right now, the tenants are getting a really, really good deal, and I need to raise these rents up. Not only that, but the landlord, like me, is not happy with the proposal to basically cap rents, to put past nationwide rent control. So the landlord is putting out there, hey, I am raising my rents because if there ever is a cap put in place, be it from the feds, be it from the local government, whatever, right? If a cap is put into place that limits me to 5%, my rents are far below that, and they're below market rates right now. So I need to raise them right now, and I'm opposed to this. So, it's like, hopefully the message gets through to these tenants too, right? That these proposals, these, far left progressive proposals, they have negative effects. They have very negative effects. And some of them will be, landlords are just, they quit. They go out of business. They're like, hey, we're not going to deal with this garbage. There's just going to be less housing available. The other thing is that landlords are going to keep their rents up, at the maximum possible. They're going to raise rents every single year because they have to. Otherwise, they'll never get that rent increase back. So, yeah, if they're only allowed to raise rent by 5%, they have to raise it by 5% every single year. Whereas in the past, a landlord might have said, okay, well, I'm going to raise it 2% this year and 2% next year. And then after that tenant moves out, I'll raise it by 10%. Nope, you can't do that anymore. That's against the law. That's against the rules. You're screwing, you're trying to screw people over. So you know what? Landlord can't do that anymore. So now they have to be, hard and dedicated to making sure the rent is increased 100% of the time to the maximum. Okay, so yeah, these rent control policies, they don't benefit anyone. They don't benefit the tenants. They don't benefit the landlord. I'm trying to figure out who they do benefit. Okay, the people who are lucky enough to live in a property when the rent control law is passed, so they already have a place, and then they have no life circumstances that cause them to move ever. Okay, these are the people who will benefit. So if you're able to already have a place when the rent control law is passed and then live in there for the next 30 years, you will benefit. But unless that is your specific situation, if you have any kids who need a place, if you have relatives or somebody who's moving new to town looking for a place after they got a job there, they're not going to be able to find a place, or they'll have to pay market rates because there's always going to be exemptions. And that's the other thing, right? They always write exemptions to the rent control laws in, and the housing that is exempted from the rent control law is very expensive. It is much more expensive than the housing would have been had there been no rent control law. A lot of people don't realize that, but what you see in places like New York is they go in there, there's a lot of rent control units, but then all the new construction stuff, which is exempted, is all luxury, all extremely expensive, and it brings the total cost of renting a property up in New York to be the highest in the entire country. That's how expensive it is. So, you know what, if they didn't have rent control and they didn't have such horrible building regulations that make it darn near impossible to build everything, guess what? Housing would be a lot less expensive. But you know what? They can't change that now. You have these people who now believe that they are 100% entitled, as though, God himself came down and said, you are granted cheap rent for the rest of your life. No one can ever remove it. That's literally what these people believe. They are that entitled. So, you know what? I agree with this landlord. Okay, I'm kind of off on a rant, but you know what? When I talk about rent control, you have to understand that rent control is a communist. It is a communist system where basically the government sets this price for a service or a good, and the cost of that the government allows the owner or whatever to charge, right, doesn't cover the cost. So you end up with a shortage of that product. This happens in every single one of the communist or socialist countries where they try to set price controls. You can just look at places like Venezuela. Okay, you can look at places like Argentina where they just removed rent control, and guess what? The number of available housing units doubled within months. Not years, months. Okay? Prices stabilized. Prices started to drop because all these new units came online that people were refusing to rent out before because they couldn't make any money. Isn't it insane how the free market can teach us so many lessons, yet people, they refuse to follow it, and instead they use hopes and dreams with their little crazy socialist systems, hoping that it will work this time. It will never work, okay? It will never work, and I absolutely hate it.